lying to oneself is more deeply rooted than lying to others. Dostoevsky. It is easy to recognize a lie from someone else, but it is remarkably difficult to recognize the lies we craft for ourselves. Because self-deception does not appear as a sudden act, it is like the roots of a tree, silently creeping into the ground, clinging to the mind bit by bit, until it becomes a part of one's very ego. People lie to others to hide the truth, but lying to oneself is how we hide the truth from ourselves, and that is the most dangerous form of deception. Many people live unhappy lives, yet still tell themselves they are fine. They stay in relationships that wither their hearts and call it sacrifice. They pursue things that no longer belong to them, but insist on believing it is their dream. When the truth is too painful, the brain creates more pleasant stories to protect itself, and the more these stories are repeated, the harder it becomes to escape the maze of one's own making. What makes self-deception more deep-seated than any other lie is that it requires no outside confirmation. A lie told to another always carries the risk of being exposed, but a lie told to oneself is nurtured in the private darkness of the mind. With no one to contradict or question it, it gradually becomes the truth that a person clings to in order to keep going. Just as someone standing in the dark for too long begins to believe that darkness is the natural state, humans can become so accustomed to illusions that they no longer remember what it feels like to face the truth. There are those who spend their entire lives running away from themselves. They smile while their hearts are hollow. They appear strong only to hide their fragility. They claim they no longer need love, while deep down, they still yearn to be understood. And the more they deny their true feelings, the heavier their souls become, like a locked room that is never opened. Because buried emotions do not disappear, they silently accumulate, only to one day erupt in the form of exhaustion, apathy, or despair. The truth is always painful, but it possesses the power to set us free. Meanwhile, self-deception is like drinking seawater to quench thirst. The more you swallow, the more parched you become inside. Confronting oneself may be the hardest thing in the world, as it requires looking directly at everything we have tried to avoid for years. But only when one stops deceiving oneself does one truly begin to live authentically. And sometimes, growing up isn't about learning to become someone else, but about having the courage to be honest with your own soul. Everything has a price, but not all prices are listed on the label. An object can be bought with money, a service can be traded for effort, a position can be reached through ambition. But life has never operated as simply as the price tags in a store. There are things without labels, without warnings, without notice. We only realize their true cost when we are too deep to turn back. A great success is sometimes paid for with years of loneliness that no one sees. A strong person may have traded countless nights of silently gnawing on their own pain. There are brilliant smiles that hide a soul exhausted from always having to appear okay. People often admire someone else's glow, forgetting that every light is fueled by something burning. No one stands at the summit without having lost something at the base of the mountain. Many prices are not paid immediately. They silently accumulate like small cracks in the soul. A lie told for convenience can cause a person to slowly lose their self-respect. A life spent only chasing money can be traded for an emptiness that lingers for years afterward. Some spend their youth chasing the world's validation, only to realize, upon achieving it, that they lost their inner peace long ago. Life is like a silent cashier. It may let you take everything first, but sooner or later, it will demand full payment. Humans are often mesmerized by the glitter in front of them, forgetting to weigh the invisible price behind it. We want love, but fear being hurt. We want freedom, but refuse to walk through uncertainty. We want to grow, but avoid suffering. Yet the truth is that everything of value requires a corresponding sacrifice. There is no depth that has not passed through loneliness. There is no resilience that has not faced failure. There is no true freedom that does not come at the cost of leaving familiar cages. Not every price is a loss. There are things that, the more we pay for them, the richer we become inside. A heart that has been hurt learns how to love more deeply. A person who has walked through suffering understands the value of peace. And sometimes, the greatest cost is not what we have lost, but living an entire life without ever daring to pay the price for what we truly desire. Those who have never suffered will never be blessed. Edgar Allan Poe. There are people who walk through life as if walking across a still lake. They avoid hurt. They avoid falling. They avoid the long nights of insomnia fueled by anxiety or despair. But because they have never stepped through the storm, they have never fully understood the value of the dawn. A soul that has never known pain is like a land that has never been tilled. It looks whole, but nothing deep can take root. Thus, sometimes suffering is not life's punishment, but life's way of expanding a person's depth. When the heart has been stifled by loss, when the eyes have been red with helplessness, they must silently gather their own broken pieces. Those who have never tasted loneliness will not fully understand the value of an embrace. Those who have never been pushed to the brink by life will not feel the hidden power within themselves. Suffering is like fire. It can consume the weak, but it can also temper a soul into something as strong as steel. And life's rewards are usually not for those who merely watch the waves from the shore, but for those who dare to step into the deep sea, accepting the risk of being submerged, only to learn how to rise again. Those who have suffered the most often carry the gentlest light within them. Because they understand abandonment, they know how to love. Because they have walked through the dark, they cherish peace. They no longer look at life with naive eyes, but with a deep, lived-in empathy. Just as a tree must endure great winds to sink its roots deep into the earth, a person only becomes steady once they have weathered their own storms. The greatest blessing is not that life never hurt you, but that after all the wounds, you still keep the ability to smile, still believe in goodness, and remain gentle enough for this world. For sometimes, the scars are exactly where the light enters most powerfully, and those who have cried in the dark are often the ones who best understand the value of happiness when the sun rises. To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. Søren Kierkegaard. There are those who spend their whole lives in a comfort zone they call peace. They dare not love too deeply for fear of hurt, dare not start for fear of failure, dare not step onto a new path for fear of losing what they have. But in truth, the most frightening thing is not failure, but for a human being to slowly turn into a shadow of themselves just because they are too accustomed to safety. For life is not cruel in a way that knocks you down instantly. It silently erodes you through repetition, through days of living without feeling truly alive. Risk always comes with a loss of balance. When a young bird leaves the nest, it does not know for sure if its wings are strong enough. When a person makes a major decision, there is always a sense of instability, like standing on a suspension bridge, swaying in a gale. It is a state where the mind panics because it can no longer cling to the familiar. But that very moment of imbalance is the sign of growth. A child only learns to walk by accepting the fall. A person only truly grows when they dare to step past the boundaries a fear has built in their mind. The irony is that many think they are protecting their lives when they are actually only protecting their fear. They lock away their deepest aspirations and convince themselves that this is enough. Gradually, they lose the ability to be moved, lose their curiosity, and lose the most authentic version of themselves. Just as a river becomes stagnant if blocked for too long, the human soul dies when it no longer dares to move. There are those who have never failed, yet their eyes hold the emptiness of someone who has never truly lived. Risk does not always bring victory, but it always brings an awakening. You might hurt, you might be wrong, you might have to start over in solitude, but at least you know you lived with the full depth of your heart. Because the greatest meaning of life is not found in avoiding every storm, but in whether you have the courage to set sail into the great ocean. Better to wobble on the journey to find yourself than to stand still forever in a cage called safety. Because sometimes the price of not daring to risk is not failure, it is losing your true self. A person who is not loyal to their own ideals cannot receive the respect of others. Albert Einstein. Others can forgive weakness, failure, or even a fall, but they find it hard to respect someone who betrays their own ideals. Because an ideal is not just a beautiful thought to be displayed in words, but the invisible backbone supporting a person's character. When someone abandons what they once believed in due to pressure, benefit, or fear, they don't just lose their way, they lose weight in the eyes of others. We admire those who live consistently with what they believe, even when it causes them hardship. A mountain is respected, not because it is soft, but because it stands firm amidst the storm. A human being is the same. Loyalty to an ideal creates an aura that needs no showing off. It is a strength that gives depth to words, steadiness to the gaze, and makes a presence reliable. Those who live for an ideal are like lighthouses in the night sea. They may be lonely, but they always give others a direction to look toward. The sad thing is that many start life with beautiful aspirations only to gradually trade them for convenience. They compromise bit by bit with falsehoods, with things that go against their hearts, then console themselves that this is maturity. But the human soul is hard to deceive. Every time an ideal is betrayed, a silent crack appears within. At first, it is just a fleeting sense of remorse, but over time, it turns into emptiness. And the most painful thing is not being looked down upon by others, but the moment you look in the mirror and no longer recognize yourself. True respect never comes from money, status, or temporary applause. It comes from a person daring to hold on to what they believe in, even when no one stands with them. One who is loyal to their ideals may not always win, but they carry a dignity that forces others to bow in acknowledgement. In a world where too many change for personal gain, steadfastness becomes a rare kind of light, and it is that light that creates the most lasting respect, not from others first, but from one's own conscience. They fear love because it creates a world they cannot control. George Orwell. There are those who do not fear loneliness, darkness, or material loss. What they truly fear is love, because love, in the end, is the only power that makes a human being lose the illusion of control. One can control their words, actions, and the image they build for the world. But when in love, the heart enters a land without a map. There, reason is no longer the absolute king, and emotion becomes a tide that can submerge every defense ever built for self-protection. Many who wear a cold exterior do so not because they are heartless, but because they are used to living in safe structures of their own making. They arrange their lives like a tidy room, everything in its place, every emotion controlled, every wound locked away. But love enters like a gale that blows the curtains wide, upsetting that entire order. It makes even the strong feel weak, and the most rational stay awake over a look or an unanswered message. And it is that very helplessness that terrifies them. People often don't fear love itself, but what love can expose. When in love, old wounds begin to speak. The fear of abandonment, the feeling of not being good enough, the memory of betrayal, all surface like shadows from deep water. Love is like a great mirror. It reflects not only happiness, but also the most fragile parts we have tried to hide for years. Thus, some choose to avoid love, to maintain a sense of control, even while deep down they ache to be understood and held. The more one tries to control everything, the further they drift from their true feelings. A heart that has never been deeply moved might be safe, but it is like a room with the door never opened. No storm enters, but the sunlight can never reach it either. Love always carries risk because it forces us out of the armor of the ego. Yet it is precisely in that loss of control that we touch our most authentic and vibrant selves. For sometimes, the most beautiful thing is not mastering everything, but daring to let your heart tremble before another without wanting to run away. We are all living in cages with the doors wide open. George Lucas. Some things are taken away by circumstance, by society, by the invisible boundaries around us. But the strange thing is that many of the cages holding us are not even locked. The door is open, the sky is there, yet we do not step out. Sometimes, a person's greatest prison is not four walls, but the fears that have taken deep root in the mind. We grow so accustomed to living within limits of our own making that we start calling it nature, fate, or just the way life is. Some spend their lives in the cage of safety. They hate their jobs, but dare not leave. They stay in relationships that wither their souls simply because they fear being alone. They carry unfinished dreams, but always delay them by saying, "Wait for a better day." But that day rarely comes, for procrastination eventually turns into invisible chains, and we become used to standing still. Like a bird kept too long in a cage, even when the door is open, it fears the vast sky outside. The saddest part is that many don't realize they are imprisoning themselves. They think they lack opportunity, but they actually lack courage. They think life is stopping them, but it is mostly their refusal to cross the threshold of fear. The human mind has a strange mechanism. It always wants to protect us from pain, so it often chooses the familiar over freedom. No matter how narrow the cage, at least it offers a sense of security. Freedom always comes with uncertainty, and uncertainty makes us tremble. But living forever in that open cage is a form of silent loss, because the first thing to die is not the body, but the ability to perceive life fully. A person who gives up their aspirations for too long will slowly lose the light in their eyes. They exist, but they are no longer truly living. And then, one day, the thing that causes them the most pain is not failure, but realizing they never dared to fly. Freedom isn't always about breaking every external boundary. Sometimes, it is simply the moment a person is brave enough to step through the door they long thought they couldn't. Because the most terrifying cage was never the one that held the body, but the one that imprisoned the soul with fear, doubt, and the habit of bowing to one's own limits. Genius is the ability to recover childhood at will. Arthur Rimbaud. Geniuses are extraordinary minds capable of calculating faster, seeing further, or creating things beyond common imagination. But more deeply, genius lies not just in intellect, it lies in the ability to retain the original soul that most humans lose as they grow up. It is the ability to see the world with eyes unclouded by prejudice and fear. A child looks at life with a wonder that is almost sacred. They can sit for hours watching the rain fall or ask questions that seem naive but touch the profound essence of existence. In the world of a child, everything is still vivid. The sky is not just the sky, but an infinite space. The wind is not just moving air, but a miracle brushing against the skin. But as we grow, we trade that ability for maturity. We learn to rationalize everything, viewing life through formulas, efficiency, and defense. The soul thus becomes as dry as a land, long without rain. Geniuses are different because they keep the door to that childhood world open. They can return to a state of absolute curiosity, where imagination is not shackled by the fear of judgment. A great painter sees color as if seeing light for the first time. A great scientist asks questions with a child's innocence, but pursues the answer with an adult's will. A genius musician can hear vibrations that others miss amidst the noise of life. They didn't lose their childhood. They just learned to carry it with them through the years. To lose curiosity is to lose the ability to be moved by small things, and to lose the unconditional joy that once existed at the beginning. When that vanishes, life becomes a dry sequence of repetitions where everything is so familiar that no magic remains. Perhaps that is why geniuses always possess a quality both profound and childlike. They are mature enough to understand the world's pain, yet pure enough to never stop being surprised by life. And it is this ability to return to the original soul that allows them to see beauty where others see only the mundane. For sometimes, the highest wisdom is not knowing too much, but keeping eyes that know how to be amazed as if living for the very first time. I don't care that they stole my idea. I care that they don't have any of their own. Nikola Tesla. There are those poor in money but rich in thought, and there are those who own everything flashy but are hollow inside, without a single idea that truly belongs to them. The sadness of this era isn't that ideas are stolen, but that more and more people are becoming comfortable living on borrowed thoughts. They parrot the opinions of others like a shadow, wearing copied values and imagining it to be their personality. But a mind that cannot generate its own thoughts is still just a room full of echoes, no matter how many ideas it gathers from outside. A true idea is not just a product of the intellect. It is the crystallization of experience, pain, observation, and inner depth. It is like a seed growing from a very specific soil within each person's soul. So, when someone steals an idea, they only take the outer shell. They can copy the words, the form, the style, but they cannot copy the spiritual journey that created it. Just as one can take an artist's instrument, but not the ears that once heard music differently from the rest of the world. What makes a person respectable is not how much knowledge they possess, but whether they dare to think with their own mind. For forming your own idea means daring to step out of the crowd, daring to doubt the familiar, and facing the loneliness of one who does not speak with a borrowed voice. This is why truly creative minds often carry a special kind of loneliness. They cannot live entirely in a world pre-built by others, for there is always a need to find their own way of looking at life. Mob mentality prefers copying over creation because copying is safe. One who repeats a popular idea is more easily accepted than one who offers a new perspective. But that is precisely what causes many souls to slowly lose their ability for independent thought. They consume thoughts like fast food, quick and convenient, but providing no spiritual depth, and eventually, they no longer know which are their true thoughts and which are just noise absorbed from the world around them. A stolen idea is never the greatest tragedy. The true tragedy is living an entire life without ever creating a light of your own in your mind. Because those with independent thought are like a flame. They can be imitated, denied, even exploited, but they cannot be replaced. For the source of their power lies not in what they own, but in their ability to constantly give birth to new worlds from the depths of their own being. Ignorance lies in the haste to draw conclusions. Gustave Flaubert. We meet someone, and after a few minutes, we believe we understand them. We hear a story and immediately decide who is right or wrong. We see a failure and quickly call it the end. Conclusions are born because ambiguity is unsettling. An answer, however superficial, still feels better than having to live with the unknown. But it is that very haste that is the source of most errors in perception. Ignorance is not just a lack of knowledge, but the illusion that one has understood enough. A shallow lake ripples easily and makes loud noises, while the deep sea remains silent. Those who understand the least are often the most eager to affirm everything, as they lack the experience to feel life's complexity. Conversely, deep minds are slower to judge. They know that behind an act may be a history of hurt. Behind a cold person may be years of pain no one sees. Life is not as simple as the labels we like to stick on one another. One who betrays you today does not mean their entire life is a betrayal. A failure does not define a person's entire worth. Even we ourselves change every day, yet we often behave as if everything can be framed by a few hasty conclusions. This is how the mind turns a vast world into small boxes for easy control, but in doing so, it loses the ability to see life's true depth. The danger of jumping to conclusions is that it kills curiosity and the capacity for understanding. When someone believes they know everything, they stop observing, listening, and learning. They no longer face the world with open eyes, but with prejudices that have long since frozen. Like a locked door, such a mind can no longer welcome new light. True wisdom lies not in always having an answer, but in the ability to live with the question longer than others. A wise person understands that life is full of gray areas where right and wrong are not always clearly separated. They are patient enough to observe before judging, and humble enough to accept that they might be wrong. For sometimes, the greatest sign of intellectual maturity is not stating a conclusion quickly, but knowing how to remain silent long enough for the truth to reveal itself.